So welcome to this ICOM UK student and emerging professional event, everyone. Very happy to see, sorry, very happy to see many familiar faces here. Well, not faces exactly, IDs. I want to say hi to Jiang, our speaker today. Welcome. Hello. And yeah, I can also see Hope in the audience, one of our previous speakers. Welcome back again. I'm really looking forward to some interesting conversations later. Let me start by introducing ourselves and this ICOM UK student community. I am Robert Wren, the student and emerging professional representative of ICOM UK, also a co-organizer of our working group. Some of you might already know my colleague, Louise Jiang, who has chaired our previous event. She will say hi to everyone later. I know many of you are already very familiar with this ICOM UK project for students and emerging professionals. This is our 5th event now. But let me repeat this again for our new friends in the meeting room today. The purpose of the student and emerging professional is to create a strong community for promoting ICOM UK's project for students and anyone who are interested in the museum industry, as well as giving relevant support. It is a platform for everyone to share ideas, give your voices, make connections, and create collaborations. We have founded a working group to process regular events like this one today, to discuss different professional areas of museum practice. We're also developing new projects beyond our current pattern to get more people involved. We welcome everyone to contact us if you have any idea to build up the community. Our first period of calling for interest process is now over, and we're going to the next phase of interviewing potential members to join our working group. But please continue to follow our events. There will be many more opportunities to join our team in the future. Okay, so back to the event. We're honored to have Jiang with us today. Han is a PhD candidate at the School of Museum Studies, University of Leicester. Her research focuses on audience engagement in the design process of museums' online collections. So in today's talk, Han will explore the role of online collection in the museum's digitization process and how engagement drives the design of online collections. I'm very excited to hear about her research and many case studies she will be sharing. As usual, our speaker will give an around 20-minute presentation. Then we will have a Q&A session with a focus on the topic. If you have any questions during this time, please feel free to type it in the chat box and I can read it out for you. Or you can just use the raise your hand button and wait to ask the question directly. After that, an open conversation will follow. It's a free section for anyone of you who is interested to bring some ideas or information to get feedback from people. Again, this platform is for everyone, so please feel free to join the discussion and contribute your ideas. I look forward to speaking to many of you later. All right, I hope everyone is ready for the talk now. And the title of the museum talk today is Crafting Engagement, Designing Online Collections for Museums. Well, I'll pass to our speaker now. Han, please feel free to take over whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen now.
Yeah.
So, can you all see my slides, but not my notes?
Yeah, no problem.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Robert and Louise, for inviting me. I'm also glad to see some of my interviewees joining this event. And Also, I would like to thank my interviewees because I can't do this research without you. So today I would like to introduce my PhD research about the design process of museums' digital collections, and specifically the role of different frameworks of engagement within the process. I'm currently in the middle of my second year. When I started this journey, I had no intentions of drilling into online collections, interfaces, and all the iterations happening behind the scene. All I wanted to learn were digital interactions and engagements, but gradually I realized two problems that many museums' digital work is facing, which have already caused profound ramifications for them since the pandemic. First problem is researchers, museum professionals working in different departments and different institutions have completely different framing of engagement in terms of what it is, how they measure it, and how they design it in museums' digital experience. And the concept of engagement has inconsistent meanings in the context of different digital products. For example, in social media, it refers to the number of accounts reached in the post about the collections. On a website, it might be indicated by the dwell time and the numbers of return users. From a macroscopic view, engagement even encapsulates everything that museums do to make themselves relevant to society. However, in the development of digital collections, engagement means something more elusive, unquantifiable, and unmeasurable. It describes the participation of stakeholders such as curators, users, and technologists. And the second problem is that many professionals still tend to recognize funding as the silver bullet to make transformations in the delivery of their digital collection projects. However, in reality, this temporal support on the investment of software rarely sustains future training and upskilling and even limits long-term innovations, especially for middle and small-sized institutions. Therefore, I decided to hone in on the activities around museums' digital collections and delve into this question. What factors influence engagement in the design process of digital collections? I would like to share several insights learned from interviews with museum professionals, designers, and technologists who are currently involved in the design of digital collection projects. I will also introduce my idea of a design matrix of engagement, which is mapped out based on different approaches used to develop digital collections. This is still a work in progress, but I hope it will give you some inspirations for your research or help you grapple with problems in digital work in museums. Before bringing us on my case studies, I would like to explain what design means in my research. It is a verb rather than a noun. It is a practice that enables a group of people to work together to solve societal problems. A good way to visualize this is to use a double diamond framework. Practitioners and researchers in many industries and academic disciplines have already adopted this framework to understand and solve social problems, create new technologies, and change organizations. The four stages: discover the problem of people, define the challenge, develop solutions, and deliver outcomes, have already become a rule of thumb in the development of many digital collection projects to enhance the effectiveness of design and can be applied to museums of almost any size. All the three case studies in my research set out with this framework in mind and have seen achievements brought out through the interactions with participants in the projects. However, what interests me most is not why these projects can achieve success, but also why their strategies and methods catalyze different approaches of engagement. My first case study is a national museum in the UK, which has more than 1 million digitized records of objects open to the public. They have a small but resourceful digital department that is consistently dedicated to all museums' digital offerings. In 2020, they started planning a reinvention project of their online collection interface, structuring the entire project into 4 phases. In depth to the product knowledge the department has implemented for years, they are able to work autonomously and agilely as a team to create and evaluate new digital features in a short amount of time. At the beginning of this project, they commissioned large-scale user segmentation to divide their interaction styles on their websites into 4 types: explore, understand, develop, and research. They also organized workshops with curators to understand the internal needs of the online collection system. Eventually, they decided to focus on exploration behavior in the first iteration. Several new features on the landing page have been developed and launched earlier this year, which allow users to shuffle and browse the images of the objects. They are currently observing analytics post-launch and navigating through the challenges of losing 2 important members of the team. And the second case is a cross-institutional project led by one museum in the UK, aiming to develop a repertoire of new digital tools that can connect collections, records, and stories in different museums. Each year, they cater to a specific strand of collections and experiment with digital tools that can navigate through the institutional silo. So far, it has 13 project partners and will soon finish its first year. They use the action research method to plan, act, observe, and reflect on what is happening in each cycle of design. They also benefit from an inquiry-led approach that brings together historians, technologists, designers, curators, and volunteers together into various workshops and pilot ways that transdisciplinary expertise can feed into the development of digital collections. For example, in one of their workshops, they pair one historian with one technologist, and the technologists allow the historian to inform them of what they could try out, such as using machine learning to capture archived materials. So for this project, what engagement really means is to work with people who are already interested in the collections and bringing their knowledge and expertise that is scarce within the museums. In the meantime, once the participants realize that their previous or current experiments might not suit their shared purpose, they can adjust the next step and ways of working together. And the third case is a middle-sized museum in Germany. It joined a partnership project with another German museum and a national museum in Sweden to experiment with digital tools that could improve their user experience with collections. Members of the core project team consist of digital directors from the 3 museums and an external designer who facilitates the knowledge and skill sharing workshops among this group of people. The entire project started with a blank canvas without a unified approach and detailed plans. After establishing their shared goal of being user-centered, each museum heads towards its own method of engaging people in design. And this museum interviewed the collection's heavy users, including artists, designers, researchers, teachers, and people working in creative industries around the world to identify directions for future development. They then recruited 5 international fellowship teams with a wide range of disciplinary backgrounds to work with the museum staff across all departments and develop easy-to-implement prototypes. They will host an online event to showcase the results of these fellows' work in October. So, what can we learn from these cases? So far, I have conducted 7 interviews with the staff working at these museums. And here's the most interesting finding. The museum's existing digital and computing capability, technology resources, and funding cannot decide whether engagement happening throughout the design process is efficient, innovative, successful, or not. I call these aspects non-human factors in design. Of course, a certain level of digitization of collections and the infrastructure of the collection database is essential so that at least you have something to work with. But in some cases, such as the Project A, the non-human factors that have supported their digital work for a long time can turn into their actual limitations. Because the museum has a resourceful digital team, and each person in the team has a very clear role and responsibility, and they have barely considered other ways of interacting with people outside of their institution. One of my interviewees left the museum after their first phase of design. As a result, she took away a lot of product knowledge and interface design skills that used to belong to the museum. This challenge even makes the museum narrow down its scope in the second phase of the project so that their team will not get overwhelmed. And this leads us to the next question. How can we design consciously so that the factors that we think would bring in more engagement will be the right choice? If we put these cases together, each seems to represent a unique approach that shows how their understanding of engagement shapes the way the museum interacts with the stakeholders. I will outline a few comparisons emerging from the results and point out some directions. So the first comparison is the structured approach versus the exploratory open-ended approach. Although all the participants claim that they intentionally adopted design thinking in the process to secure the long-term and consistent development of digital collections, their approaches show different extents of flexibility and adaptability. In the structured approach, for example, the Project A begins with the goal of developing or reinventing a specific product and detailed planning of iterations. And each iteration starts with pre-test and focuses on new specific pages and features of priorities. The prototypes of new design are informed by user research or internal workshops. By the end of each iteration, new features or pages are launched. New digital tools are only introduced to the design process if they can improve the efficiency of working or serve the development of new features. By the end of each iteration, some of these features and functionalities were optimized. In contrast, the exploratory approach is open-ended and does not pre-impose specific product deliverables. This allows for greater flexibility and nimbleness in responding to challenges and uncertainties. Project B and C use this approach to open up more opportunities for knowledge sharing with external collaborators and technology interventions. In this approach, museums have a longer time frame for the discovery phase, during which they can tend to engage users directly. How museums choose to navigate through constraints also underlies their potential for engagement. The constraints in the design process include the capacity of staff, museum staff's willingness to adopt new technology, collection data integrity, existing digital products and research results, institutional brands and representations, as well as the intangible nature of the online audience's experience. This combination of these factors is critical in determining certain design decisions and people's engagement. For example, opinions from the management board and funders might influence the features that the museum would like to add to the interface. Some of these constraints are institutional, coming from the inside of the organization structure and rules, which restrict the range of activities that designers can initiate. When facing challenges emerging from these constraints, participants in the structured approach tend to choose a safe route by adjusting the functionalities they would like to deliver while maximizing the representations of institutional value. On the contrary, the exploratory approach itself is usually developed as a solution to the heavy constraints faced by the museums. Therefore, the participants were predisposed to the limitations and unexpected challenges that at an early stage and brought in new values to the institutions and audience through flexible ways of collaboration. Finally, engagement in the design process is directly linked to the types and levels of needs that designers want to draw out and cater to. As most museum professionals admit that engagement is a broad concept that is difficult to capture and define, so they tend to tailor it to their institutional context. In Project A, museum professionals usually choose to engage the people who previously avoided attending to features on the collection's webpage and reinforce what I call behavioral or functional needs by adding new features that lead to the indicators of better experience with the page. The design decisions of Project A were driven by pre-tests that outlined 4 types of user interaction modes. The engagement of one interaction mode, the Explorer, is reflected through quantifiable metrics such as higher dwell time. To extend the dwell time, they prioritize the design of recommendation system and contextual pages, which enable thematic explorations and browsing of objects. The functionality of design collections is improved by collecting and reinforcing behavioral feedback. The counterpart to this functional method is to directly interact with participants in real life and to understand how they make meanings with digital collections. And I call this meaningful or intrinsic needs. Because it not only observes how people experience the digital, but also encourage them to act with the digital for their own purposes. By inviting users to work as designers instead of passively report on their experiences, the co-design process helps draw out their meaningful needs through the practice. Both Project B and C use this method to encourage the active participation of heavy users. The second project organized workshops with historians and technologists, asked them to articulate their research interests, and then experimented with tools that enable these intersections. The other one caters to artists and designers, commissioning the fellowship teams to create their own designs and prototypes based on their emotional and personal connections with the objects. They decided on the following design actions, goals, and the ways of working according to the reflections gathered in the previous stage. It is worth noting that these methods are not mutually exclusive. During the discovery phase of Project A, the museum also conducted interviews and collaborative design workshops to understand the knowledge and needs of other museum staff. The impact mainly comes from the inside of their institution, which only assists in creating new features, such as adding license information and signposting problematic objects in the collections. To summarize these findings, I put some of these methods into a spectrum and created a design matrix of engagement. So in this matrix, the horizontal axis represents the degree of openness and flexibility of the project's management, and the vertical axis represents the level of the needs of the user or participants. Methods that fall into the bottom left quadrant might be suitable for reinforcing existing users' experience of engagement by testing and refining the functional features of digital collections. In the top right quadrant, we can find tools and methods that give participants the most control, such as interdisciplinary knowledge sharing and collaborative inquiry with stakeholders from a variety of backgrounds. An innovative design process for digital collections should include a palette of methods that are spread across all quadrants. Of course, this is still a work in progress based on some of the very initial findings from my PhD research. So if you have any suggestions or would like to discuss about it, feel free to drop me a line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Han, for the fantastic presentation. It was very interesting to see the comparison between different case studies and to learn about the various factors influencing the process of online collection design. So now I'm looking forward to some questions or feedback from our attendees. Please feel free to press the raise your hand button or type your question or feedback in the chat box. We'll be with you soon. Okay, so please, Jose or Jose, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne and Ren, for this brilliant presentation. So much appreciate that you share your discoveries with us. I'm a professional from culture arena. I'm partner of a studio called Culture Inquiry. I happen in a studio, and we work a lot with community center museums and engagement. So first, briefly, when the pandemic impact in the culture arena, all the museums ran like crazy chickens without head to share digital contents, whatever. And well, how was the impact of this nowadays, like 2 years after all this crazy marathon of digital contents, to tell in your opinion, to tell the people we are here, so we need to stay, and the only way to stay is share videos or share digital contents or whatever. But what's the impact at the end? So somebody has evaluate this in the mid long term. This is the first question. And the second question is relate with the community engagement, because what's your opinion? Should be the community engagement with the physical community prior to the digital community engagement? I mean, do we need, as a professional, first engage the physical community, the people, the real people, and be part of these communities with one very important input that maybe we find on the communities very important digital skills that they can teach us, they can teach to the museums. So this is important. And finally, and is the final question because it's so interesting, what's your idea about metaverse, the metaverse environment and the community engagement on metaverse? Because it's a very controversial topic. I mean, some people consider that this metaverse is only like a kind of commercial way to get data, biometrics data for you and do business. But I'm curious about your idea. And thank you so much.
要装的一个那种火灶是吗？火灶，像王刚的那种是吗？像王刚的那种是吗？对，平时我们不回去住，怕浪费，就过年唯一每年。
Okay, please, Han, could you turn on your microphone because I had to mute.
No problem. Thank you, Jose, for this wonderful question. So I'll start with the first one, the pandemic's impact. Yeah, so I think what pandemic makes museums realize is that bringing as many technologies as possible won't solve the problem. And the only way you can be really relevant to your community is to find the human-centric approaches to engage them in the design process of these digital offerings. And as you mentioned, there are some reports about the long-term impact of the pandemic on museums' digital provisions, such as the ICOM report about museums and the COVID-19. And I guess NEMO just published a report last year. And I think UNESCO has a report on that topic as well. And I strongly recommend you to look into that. And I remember I read from some of these reports that the short-term temporal support from one funder or one project's funding will not sustain long-term improvement of museums' digital capabilities. And I guess not many museums realize this problem post-pandemic, and they still tend to ask the question, where are the funding sources that I can find for this digital project, instead of asking the ways that can continue, that the ways that they can continuously work with their communities in the future. So I hope that answers your question. And the second one, if I get you correctly, did you mean that how to match the physical experience of engagement with the digital experience? Is that correct?
It's a question of priorities. I mean, sometimes we start with the digital engagement. My question is, are we inverting the order? Maybe we need to start building good and trust relationships with the physical community, be part of the physical community, be so as a part of them, build trust relationships. That is something very difficult, and you need to spend time. And then when you are so as a part of them, you can start to think in terms of digital engagement. That's the question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it depends. It really depends on the museum's mission and the museum's values and its institutional culture, and what kinds of audiences they want to engage. For example, maybe I should expand this with one of my case studies. So remember the Project C I just talked about? They are actually a local museum in Germany, and so they are using a kind of hybrid approach. So they invite people around the world through social media and on their website to collaborate with their museum professionals in all departments, so that they can bring in the broader and global view of how people perceive their collections, and what kind of things people want from their collections, and build in their knowledge and different perspectives. So because this, like I said, this broader and more global view is what the museum think is critical and what they need most at this moment. So they choose to use digital online methods instead of physical engagement with people. But in some of other cases, like the Project B I just mentioned, because these projects aims at working with museums across the UK and to connect the collections separated in each institutions, and maybe come up with a narrative that can connect these collections. So they also engage people in real life, in physical environments, and they organize workshops so that people can actually see each other, and maybe put on some sticky notes and do brainstorming sessions. So I think there are many ways to combine these methods together, and don't have to choose one or the other. Yeah. So as for your final question, metaverse. So to be honest, I'm also quite new to metaverse as a concept, and so I don't really have an answer for this question. But I'm working on a conference paper with a colleague about how museums understand metaverse as a concept, and how they respond to these concepts in their practice. And I've seen some very interesting examples in museums, mainly in the UK and Europe. So some museums understand metaverse as an opportunity for them to open up their collection data and their images of collections. And they do that by partnering with the third-party agency or game company to outsource all their collection data on another platform. So people can download them for free and use them in a video game. And they describe this as their attempt in metaverse. So what I can say is that I guess this is another vague and inconsistent concept, and many museums are trying out at this moment. And I'm looking forward to seeing more examples in the future. So now I don't really have an answer about how museums can really benefit from engagement in metaverse. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Han. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Han. And another question from Patricia. She said, thanks, Han. Could you please talk a little bit more about the matrix you presented, please? So is there a specific area, Patricia, or just generally the whole thing? Yeah, I think probably the problem is the image was a bit small on the screen.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I couldn't find the mic button. I am not very good at using Teams. Yeah, please, if you could talk about that a little bit better, because yeah, I couldn't. I mean, the image was too small to really understand the concept. I don't know if you can maybe take a look deeper on that, because I thought it was very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Sorry, this is actually a kind of last minute work, so I didn't manage to put a clear picture on the slides. I can email you a better version if you like. So so basically, this design matrix is a comparison of different methods used in the design process. And can I just share? Maybe I just share my screen again so that.
Yes, please. Maybe you can zoom it in or something. Yeah. Try it.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, the horizontal axis is the kind of management approach of these design and the digital collection projects museums are using. Some of them tend to pre-plan this project very well, and so they are using a kind of structured approach to have very clear goal about what they would like to deliver at the beginning of their project. And they have clear divisions of the different stages of design and different iterations, and what kind of evaluations are there to tell them the metrics of success. And on the other side is the unstructured approach. So these are the more open-ended, exploratory, and experimental approach that embrace the uncertainties in the process, and maybe they don't even know what they want to build at the beginning of this design process, and they kind of develop this idea as they go along. And so I found that in some projects, they are so the structured and unstructured projects are kind of using different types of methods in their process. For example, the structured projects may be very robust in user testing and the prototyping, and maybe the consistent feedback evaluation from collected from their users. However, these unstructured approach tend to collaborate more with interdisciplinary stakeholders and stakeholders outside of these institutions. So they are taking it slow, but they are make their project very open. And on the vertical axis, are the kind of needs from the stakeholders and the users. So these comparisons are the intrinsic meaningful needs and the behavioral and functional needs. So for the structured approaches, the museums tend to focus more on the functional needs of audiences, such as the dwell time and the numbers of pages viewed and what kind of objects they viewed on their online journey, and they focus a lot on the analytics behind it. However, in these unstructured projects, maybe they are not so focusing on these quantifiable metrics about audience engagement, and they directly engage their users. So they do not only observe their users, they invite users as designers as well. I think that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Much clearer. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other questions from the audience? Anyone have anything to add or to ask? Okay, if not, I probably want to ask a question myself. So I can see that Hope is here. I think probably she can join this discussion, because I remember from our event 3, she talked about her project with the Hunterian Museum about designing the website and decolonizing the website. And today your case studies are more focusing on the engagement and the process of the engagement with users and the process of online collection design. So yeah, probably this question is for Hope and also for you. So how do you think the experience of the users or the engagement with the users falls into the different factors influencing the process of the design collection design?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very useful question for museums, I guess. First, I think I need to point out is that not every museum has the what I call UX capability, which means not every museum has staff dedicated to design and measure the user experience of their website. So for these museums who do have these provisions, they have kind of their own metrics of evaluating these user experience. For example, the Project A I just mentioned are focusing exclusively on the exploration behaviors. So these are kind of the people who have some interest in what the museums offer, but they do not know what the entry points into the collection is, and they just browse through their website aimlessly. So they are creating new features according to the traits of these interaction modes. And of course, this is what part of what I call the behavioral needs of audiences. And I think what my presentation want to explain is that measuring these metrics is not the only way to lead to successful engagement in your design process. If your museum do not have the UX maturity or sufficient digital capability, you can do this in other ways. There are alternative approaches, such as having casual conversations with your heavy users directly. So instead of developing like the interview guidelines and use the interview protocols and go through these very strict stages of user experience measurements. You can just have some chats with your users through social media platforms and ask how they think. And I think the themes about their usages of collections will naturally emerge throughout this process.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting to know. And I hope did you want to say something? I saw you raise your hand. You can say hi to everyone.
Oh, yes. Actually, I think Hans' research is pretty interesting, and I really admire you organize 3 cases very well. And actually, when I raise hand, I want to ask practical questions about how do you decide your 3 cases, and how did you get in touch with them, and what is your role during the whole research? Did you make suggestion for them, or did you really participate in this project, or you mainly observe the process? I really want to know more about that.
Thank you. I'm so glad finally someone raised this question, because I didn't decide on these 3 cases at the very beginning of my research. In fact, in my first year, my research is not even about the design process of digital collections. At that time, I started my PhD with a kind of naive view, and I think that larger institutions with higher level of digital literacy and maybe a more resourceful digital team must have better things to offer to their audiences. So I started with Project A, which is the project in a large national museum in the UK. And it turns out that I guess they don't really have an open culture in their institution. And they, when I interviewed them, they sometimes the answers they give me are not the kind of things I really want to know, and the answers are there. Maybe I can find their answers in their blog articles. So yeah, I think it's very hard to just to be open in their conversations and let alone joining them in their design process. But gradually I realized that there are design projects that's in organizations with open culture and with these people who are eager to collaborate more with external partners. So I just attend different events and conferences and find these people who are willing to have conversations with me. And this makes everything much easier. And I think this is something that I learned. The most important thing I learned from my PhD research is that maybe don't choose the cases, choose the people who are willing to talk to you.
Thank you. It's really good suggestion. Yeah, and I really want to ask, why you decide you choose these 3 cases, and I think a case study sometimes they are hard to compare with each other. I mean, how do you make sure they are comparable?
I didn't realize they are comparable until I finished the 7 interviews with all the staff. So I guess it's a very lucky coincidence. And recently, I am actually thinking about change the analysis methods from case study into a more general thematic comparisons between different interviewees, because I'm also interviewing staff outside these 3 main cases. So I have spoken with some small institutions in the US and design agencies in the UK and large national museum in Europe. And they also have very interesting insights that can speak to the interviews with these 3 cases. So I'm actually thinking about a way to reorganize the findings. And I guess I think your opinion is very interesting, that it's really hard to make the case studies comparable. And for me, the main like kind of catalyst that pushed me to turn from case study to another approach is that I think if I still focus on case studies, many contextual information about these projects are actually available and open access on these museums' blogs, and it's not necessary for me to just describe them again and describe their design process case by case and compare them to each other. So yeah, I'm thinking about reorganizing the research.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. I see Jose raised your hand again, so please go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want to monopolize the term, but it's so interesting, your intervention, and so inspiring. And there's a lot of issues and things that are emerging in my head. Just a couple of them. One is we find a lot of hybrid situations in museums, especially museums related with big archives, with big cultural heritage. So then, because maybe they have a big story and they have a big archive, and the concept was, okay, our archive is safe, is well preserved, but it's closed. Nobody is interested in. The second path was, okay, we transform this in a digital collection. And maybe we hope that now will be accessible our cultural heritage. But it was not like that. Because again, the staff considers super interesting, super unique, but with any community connections, with any idea about what is relevant, is interesting and is important per se by them, for them. So I'm working in a big platform in Europe called Europeana. I don't know if you know. And in Europeana, they have like 5 million objects, digital objects from different 4,000 different museums or cultural institutions from all over the Europe. And it's a very hot topic, the question of democratize the digital content. And I think this is sometimes the unique way to create this meaningful experience that you mentioned in the presentation of your cases, because you need to consider what is meaningful for a student, for a old woman, or for a I don't know, doctor, or for whatever from the community relate with our cultural heritage. And the second point, briefly, is what do you think about this incredible movement that we see? I think 2 weeks ago could be that MoMA, the museum, is sell Picasso's and master art to finance their digital collection. So they are the MoMA, I think it's the MoMA in New York. They are selling very important masterpieces to finance and to fund digital collections. I think it's a very interesting move. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose, for mentioning Europeana. Actually, I was in the Europeana online conferences prior to this event. And they do have some very interesting projects coming up. And so for your first opinion, I think Yeah, it's really common that museum staff and wider audiences have different points of interest, especially for archival materials. And I think what is important for museum is that you don't always have to engage more people, new users. Sometimes it will be helpful enough if you just work with people who are already interested in the collections, but work with them in different ways. For example, think about develop new solutions to present these collections, but also collaborating with technological specialists. For example, in my second case study, they pair the historians and the technologists together to develop solutions for their collections. So they are engaging with people who are already very familiar with the materials and familiar with the collections. So the point is what kind of methods you plan to use. Yeah, so I think not every museums need to solely focus on expanding their audience pool and engage more people, because apparently not maybe some collections are not just visually pleasing and it's not easy to make audiences like them. But also an alternative way to achieve that goal is to work with people, the general audience who have personal connections or family connections to the stories of these collections. For example, the collections about transnational trade or immigrant stories. So it would definitely be helpful if museums can organize workshops and events that encourage audiences who can contribute their stories with these collections and add them into the collection database or the interface. And I think quite a few museums in the UK are doing that. I remember the Honeyman Museum are working with African and Caribbean diasporas to organize online event with them and ask them to contribute their emotional stories and personal links with these collections. And I'm not sure if they are still doing that project, but I guess you can look at that on their website.
Thank you so much, Han.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Han, and for everyone for the great ideas and discussions. So I'd like to move on to the next part of our event, is to some open conversations. So this is an important section of our meeting because this ICOM UK platform belongs to every one of you. So we are really keen to hear as many different thoughts and ideas as possible, even if it might be beyond the topic of museum talk today. Yeah, and first I'd like to just throw out something for everyone to discuss a bit, because since our last event, there's a lot of big events happening, and one of them is, I'm sure many of you have already know, a new museum definition was approved by the Extraordinary General Assembly of ICOM on 21st in Prague, in the Prague meeting. And if I could, Luis, could you help me to post the definition in the chat? Yeah, and I'm just gonna read it out for yeah, in case anyone missed this new definition. So the new definition for museum is a not-for-profit, permanent institution in the service of society that researches, collects, conserves, interprets, and exhibits tangible and intangible heritage open to the public, accessible, and inclusive. Museums foster diversity and sustainability. They operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of community, offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. Yeah, and for me, this is a very well structured and comprehensive definition, because it was consulted through thousands of museums from over 100 countries. Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone want to explore this topic or have any comments, any thoughts on this, because there actually are 2 points that I personally find very interesting, and one of them, well, apart from the ongoing importance of the accessibility and inclusivity, but also the mention of the role of communities. And I believe, just now Jose was saying that you're working with communities and museums. So yeah, I feel like, and one of the key topics and focus for ICOM during the past year was to bridge communities through museums and how they influence and define each other. So yeah, I was wondering, does anyone have any comments or specific?
Yeah, Patricia, I agree. It's as beautiful as Wikimedia Movement's mission. And it reminds me of the partnership between Wikimedia and many small museums.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I see Farah raised a hand. Please go ahead. Just join the conversation whenever.
Hi everyone, and hi Han. Thank you so much for this fascinating presentation. I really enjoyed it. Regarding the ICOM new definition of museum, first of all, it was very interesting that the new definition includes for the first time phrases like inclusivity, accessibility, and sustainability, ethics, as you mentioned. But I was reading in an art newspaper that why some phrases such as decolonization, repatriation, and restitution, that there are central issues for many museums in the developing world, were absent in the new definition. And I admit that it's very difficult to include lots of phrases, and it's very difficult to include everything. But I just have a question: if you have any comments, anything that what can be done, especially these are very important topics nowadays, so why they are absent in the new definition? Thank you so much, and I don't want to take your time anymore. Thank you.
That's okay. So did you mention the decolonization, right?
Yes, decolonization, repatriation, and restitution.
Okay. Yeah, I probably Xiaoqiang, Hope, do you have any comments on this? Because I know that you're working on the decolonizing museums.
Yeah. Thank you, Vera. And yeah, actually, I attend Prague, ICOM Prague, and I had the same thought as you. I remember after that, the representative said they left the space for people to consider decolonization issues. Yeah, I kind of feel this definition is that maybe not enough for all. Yeah, but at least they mentioned museum need to communicate and operate ethically and professionally. I think it's a way to let everyone have an agreement on this. At least people could define what's their ethic and how to do that professionally. Yeah, and I think we all need to participate in this new definition. How could we really put this new definition into practice?
Yes, I think the definition is surely it went through a lot of consultations. I think it was over 2 years to make this final decision of the new definition. So surely not everything or every factor can be put into this definition, but yeah. So like for example, just these factors you mentioned probably. Yeah, and just like Hope said, it's open for discussion, and you know, it belongs to some of the areas they mentioned. So I can see someone's typing. So Roxanne was saying in third world countries, the fact of being not for profit is an issue because there is no support from the government to invest in culture or education in general. Social and political issues stand in the way. Yes, I agree. That's one of the main issue for I think like some obstacles for the museums or galleries to develop. Okay, and Rachel said that how does museums' sale of NFTs, such as the British Museum, impact the community and accessibility? Okay, does anyone have any comment on this?
I can comment a bit on this.
Sure.
I'm aware that some museums are selling NFTs because they want to engage with the NFT and crypto community specifically, instead of increasing their general accessibility. For example, British Museum are in partnership with La Collections, which is an NFT and digital collectibles company in France, and they have a Discord groups. So I guess they're the community, these community that they are catered to are already very active in collecting NFT and the digital collectibles of museums objects. So I highly doubt whether this is an approach that really can improve the accessibility with wider communities. Yeah.
Yes. So Patricia is saying they want to monetize some part of their collections, but it should not affect the accessibility of open collections. Yes, that's right. And yeah, Jose, please just join the conversation. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to be a little bit more controversial, if you don't mind. I mean, yes, of course, ICOM need a institutional definition about what is a museum. All the focus were pointed to this conference and was like a kind of homework from the last ICOM that was very controversial, the meaning. So the professional community need a kind of consensus, an agreement about what is a museum to know and to share and to spread and to see themselves. But just one reflection. I mean, and I was thinking about the claim of the Prague conference, the power of the museums.
Yeah.
They didn't put the power of the community, they put the power of the museum. So my reflection is, yeah, this is obviously a consensus definition to, yeah, all people as much as possible can be happy. But my question, my $1 million question is why the museum should be defined only and exclusively by professionals of the museum. Why not? And I cited one sentence of a great leader in museums, this Julie Becker, that is the CEO of the Anchorage Museum. She tells always that museums are like mirrors. And I think it's a good metaphor to define what should be a museum. Maybe the museum should be what the community want that to be. That's a little bit controversial, but in the program and in the conferences and some of the presentations and some of the meetings, I miss a little bit this another different perspective. I mean, I think we need in 2022 start to think about this very seriously, because communities has a lot of urgencies, challenges that if the museums are not aware, maybe another people, another groups, another initiatives will attend, and not always very happily. So that's my reflection. Thank you.
Yes. Luis, are you to follow up on this, or do you have another topic?
Hi everyone, nice to see you again. I'm not asking question, but this is an interesting topic because for me, as like following, like when every time ICOM produce a new definition, it's really interesting to observe that how ideas of museum developing. So just try to fill the context. I'm posting the definition in 2007 and also definition produced like 4 years ago to 2019. It's easier for you guys to make a comparison. I will just do it now. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, and Jose, you know, in terms of your comment, I think, yeah, of course, the communities are very important part of, you know, the museum, and they're also trying to engage with the communities more. And I think they when they were like setting up this new definition, they've consulted I think over 120 something committees worldwide. So yeah, I think and many of like when we received the consultations, and because we all come from different backgrounds and we belong to different communities, and yeah, I believe that they're trying to engage with the communities, you know, as much as possible, but still, you know, I don't know, it's just my personal opinion that we still like need a professional, or like a professionally view or evaluation of this definition, so to, you know, to define this. But during this process, you know, of course every factor, the communities and everything will be considered, I'm sure. Yeah, I can see a lot of chat in the chat box. Yeah, if any of you want to speak, just feel free to open your mic and speak.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I was seeing Rachel's messages in the chat. This is a super interesting discussion, and I'm not saying that I do not have issues around NFTs, because that's not necessarily the point I was trying to make. I was just trying to say that one are the ethical issues that you might have around the concept, and another topic or another discussion is around access. As I understand, and maybe someone who has a better understanding of the process can correct me, and I'd be really thankful of that. But as I understand, NFT, when you do an NFT, you are selling a part, intangible part of an artwork, of our pieces, or a cultural asset, or whatever. You can do NFTs around anything. I can do an NFT about a picture of myself. I don't think that that's going to be very interesting, but you can do eventually an NFT around everything. But it does not compromise the access to the original piece. You're just selling a part of that piece. And yeah, it can be unethical, but that's another question. What I said, that NFTs do not have necessarily something to do with access. You can do NFT and you can have open access policies to the rest of the piece that remains in your building, within your building, even though the digital copies of that original piece, you're not selling. I mean, how you can explain it? When you do an NFT, you're not selling a digital copy. You are selling a code, an intangible part that do not exist in real world, to someone else as an investment asset. I do not understand that market. I don't see the benefits necessarily, but people are investing in that way as they invest in enterprise actions or so things that you don't see in the real world. But yeah, that was my reflection, and we can discuss about this for a while. But what I meant is that it's not necessarily connected to access. For just to be clear.
Farah, do you want to say something about this?
Not particularly about this, but I just wanted to add this sentence that digitizing every items in the collection, I mean, having a digital collection does not mean accessibility. They're not synonymous to each other. We need to very take care of digital inclusion and digital exclusion. For sure, if we digitize our collection, more people will access to the collection, but those people who have already visited our collection, or I mean, they have some kind of access to internet, or they have some skills to access. But I just wanted to add these sentences that digitization doesn't mean necessarily a synonym with accessibility. It's something that some museum directors really want to just concentrate on, or they just want to say we are increasing accessibility. It's increasing accessibility for those who have already have Wi-Fi, who have already the laptop or computer device, but not already who are living in a, like say, in a small city, in a small village. How do you want to increase accessibility for those who are excluded digitally? Thank you. It was my reflection.
Yes, and I guess it also links to what Roxana just typed in the chat box, to how to fulfill the inclusive characteristic with the digital breach. She said, I guess you're talking about museums in Europe or the US. What about the rest of the world? Digital breach includes age difference, income, location, etc. So if museums are aiming to contribute to social justice and global equality, what are they plan to do regarding that? Yeah, well, I guess that of course, the museums in the UK, or in Europe generally, or in the US, they've had a really solid foundation to do this, to be digitized. But the rest of the world, well, because I come from China, and I did interview with some of the museums in China last year about the digitization of their collections and well, of their museum in general. Yeah, sometimes it can lack a bit support, either it's like technically, or the society's recognition of this stuff. But the museums are also trying to do that, and they're starting the process of that. So I think this digital process is like a global thing. Yeah. And like, for example, Han and Hope, they're all working on designing the digital collections. Yeah, so probably maybe Han, are you thinking of maybe using some case studies like outside of Europe, or like in the other parts of the world, how they are doing their, how they are designing their online collections?
Yeah, I'm aware of that in some countries, like in India and in Africa, I can't remember which country exactly in Africa, but they have some platforms are use a quite different approach to present their digital collections information. They tend to use a kind of aggregative approach, such as unite a lot of museums and present one type of their collections online. Of course, there are a lot of work behind the scene, and this is still a very new thing, and not many platforms and professionals are dedicated to that, but we can see these things emerging. And so for the project about African collections, again, I think that's a brief, I think that's, I vaguely remember it's about the restitution, the connection between the restitution and the African community and the endangered heritage that hasn't been digitized yet. So I think what they are doing is to, on the one hand, discover the connections between the restitutional objects and the local community, but also to try to find ways to digitize the objects and the heritage that hasn't been digitized yet. So there are a lot of infrastructure work to be done in these areas. And again, this is not a part of my research focus, but yeah, this is a very interesting topic to follow up on.
Yes, that's very interesting. And the example you said about in India, yeah, I guess, yeah, there are various ways to engage with this issue, and I'm sure that all over the world, that every country and every institute, they are trying to get into the process of digitization. Yeah, just it's like a bit of varied engagement and process. Yeah. And I see Patricia posted something that she wrote. Yeah, we could have a read later. Yeah, there's been some wonderful discussions today, and but I'm afraid that our time has almost come to an end. Well, if there's any follow-up ideas or discussions, just yeah, we can. We have the Facebook group, and yeah, I'll post it. Louise will post it in the chat box later. We can continue this discussion. Yeah, I just want to close the meeting by thank you all again for so many wonderful discussions and ideas, and bringing many thought-provoking topics to the group. And it's so nice to see all of you. And our next event date is yet to be decided, so it's not 6 weeks from now. It's because it will be integrated with ICOM UK's next big event, and I think there should be a series of events and talks focusing on Ukraine. But yeah, we're still working on that. So please keep an eye on our social media page, ICOM UK official news page and the Eventbrite page, because once the date is confirmed, we will publish it on these platforms. And yeah, please, just if you're interested, please follow us on the Facebook. Yeah, we'll update when organizing student events, and we won't bother you that much. But yeah, you can post your ideas and thoughts on that if you want. And yeah, if you do like receiving any museum news and information from ICOM, please also follow ICOM UK's social media. So before we close it, are there any questions? I'm just going through the chat. Okay, so Roxana is asking, who's the author of the 2019 definition of museums? I think the author is, well, there's no actually author for these definitions. For example, today, this year, it was published by the I think it's the museum definition. It's the standing committee for the museum definition in ICOM, and I think it's the same for 2019. I'll just type it in the chat box. Okay, are there any other questions, either about our working group or about the event or the project? Okay, if there's no further questions, for now, thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Han, again, for giving us a wonderful talk. Oh, just a moment. Yeah, just like Louis said, it's a bit of like a really long process of consulting and going back and forth on the definition. Okay, so our event is officially over. Thank you all for coming. I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.